State University, New Jersey, currently finalizing her second master's degree, works as a life coach at Private Office, coordinates LAPS, which stands for Latin American Psychological Support Center in New Jersey. She's president of Good Harvest Fraternal Group, a nonprofit 501c3 charitable organization comprising a Spiritist center and a community sector located in Newark, New Jersey. She will be shedding light as to a few of the psychological and spiritual components that brings us to commit immoral, unethical, or illogical harmful acts. The concept of good and evil will be discussed tonight with us in this beautiful talk that she'll be giving to us about why do good people do bad things. With no further ado, we'll pass the word to Deborah. Deborah, please.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, I like the center, not just the discarnate's answer. You know, the incarnate's answer too. So that's a good thing. Well, tonight we're going to have this topic, not really of just good and evil, but the main thing that we have to really get out of here is what brings good people to commit evil or bad acts. And I begin this question, I begin by asking this: are we good? And we can always interact. I like to be with everybody around in the room. So it's not about me, it's about us. Think about it. We don't necessarily have to say anything we don't want to say. But, you know, if you do want to, feel free. So we have to ask, are we good? Are we where in the spirit scale that we study in Spiritism, where do we fall? Are we closer to the primitives or are we closer to the angels? Hard to answer that one, huh? But it's there. The answer is there on the Spirit's book. And we're going to see that for us to ask if good people can do evil acts, we have to understand if we are good to begin with. Is the amount of responsibility the same for someone who would be close to a primitive being as to one who is closer to an angelic being? If they commit an evil act, would it be the same responsibility? Would they bear the same responsibility for committing that act? Or it depends on their awareness. So it depends on what do we think. How much have we already acquired in knowledge? If I know if a little child comes in here and she comes in running and she kicks me on the leg, is she an evil child? Well, let's put a 1-year-old. We couldn't call her an evil child, right? If she comes in stumbling and she doesn't know very well and she kicks me because she lost her balance, would that make things different? There's intention. That's exactly it. And there's also, if an adult comes in and kicks me and leaves, is there a different responsibility here than a 1-year-old? Of course, right? So we begin by really thinking about these things. Is there such thing as purely good on earth? There has been one, correct? One person that has lived here who we can say was purely good. When he incarnated, because he didn't reincarnate, he had already reached the apex of what goodness is. So for everybody else, it's good because then we'll start to think that we're not genuinely good people, but we're not also not evil. We're not evil people. We're here today. We could have been anyplace else. So that already shows that we are intending, we are pushing for more knowledge, for a moral development. And that's good because then we understand that we're all in the same boat. As I took the train here today, I was talking to Daniel and I said, in the end, we're all going to the same station. We might be on different levels of the train, maybe first class, second class, third class, but I'll guarantee that it's the same route. And if the conductor knows what he's doing, then we're going to a good place. And we can bring this to our lives. Every time that we compare to someone as if we're better than them, we are more good than them, no, we're just in the same wagon. We're just in the same train. We're at different parts of it, but we're all going to reach the same destination. So it's good to begin by not being judgmental. When we see an act and we believe that person to be evil, maybe we should take into account their history. We should take into account what they went through, what brought them to commit something. Because everybody has a history. Nobody here has the same story. And that's why I love human beings. That's why I love psychology, working with people. Because you hear amazing stories. You hear amazing people that surpass things that they never believed they would. And if you just show people a little glimpse that they too have goodness in them, that goodness comes out. And when we expect someone to be evil, their evil side comes out. So when we expect people to do good, the studies show that they usually do. What do you guys see on this? And now we can answer. Angels? Devils? Bats? Angels, okay. Oh, and that's Esker, that's the author. But when we see a picture like this, when I ask this question, a few people right away, they see the angels, right? They see the little white figures. But then some people just stay quiet. Why? Because they saw the bats, right? So they say, oh, does that mean something? And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. What it means is if you concentrate on the white, you will see good. If you really seek to see goodness, you will see it. If you concentrate on the black, you will see the bats. So we all have this dualism. We all have these parts. That brings to the second part. One of my favorite psychologists, Jung, he says that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So we all know that we have this part of us that we don't really want to admit that we have. That's what he used to call the shadows. This psychologist was great because, he was a disciple of Freud, but he really, in essence, was a very spiritualist person. He was very close to spirituality. And he understood that all of us carry this part inside of us, that if we push it and we don't want to admit that we have it, we can never learn from it. We can never make peace with it. And that's what he called the shadows. And the thing is, you see a lot of people who, I like this on Facebook. Sometimes people have Facebooks or social media, and they only put these angels and how amazing they are and this is good. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. But when you talk to them, you completely, who is this person? Is this the same person that's always talking about Jesus? And then I ask them for a ride to the hospital and they say, I can't, right? And there's a dissonance there because and that's what Jung is saying here. When you look at the light, and we know that if you come too close to the sun, you'll get burnt. So you have to be cautious. You have to always be seeking the light. You always have to seek knowledge. But you have to admit that you also have this shadow. And once we admit that we also have so much to know, because I stand here saying that I know nothing. I absolutely know nothing. I am so beginning to understand what psychology is all about. And once we understand that, how little we really know, we begin to really make friends with this shadow. Once I know that my tendencies are not all good, then I can work with them. Which tendencies are not good? Some people always ask, oh, what about that past life theory, therapy, and what do you think that I was in a different life? It's very easy to know. Look at your tendencies. Look at what attracts you. Most likely, that was in your past somehow. I do an exercise at our center, and once in a while, we have a lot of group activity and dynamics. And sometimes I say, hey, let's go to the window. And sometimes we break a little, orthodox methodologies. And we all go to the window, and I say, pay attention to what attracts you. And everybody's looking outside, and we live in a very, but the center that we have is located in the inner city, so a lot of things going on outside, right? And I tell people, look outside. Even now, if we said, go outside and look out there and look at the billboards and whatever is out there and tell me what attracts you. And it's amazing to see that the smokers will see the Marlboro Lights sign. The ones that have a criminal past will see the one guy that walks funny and it looks like he's carrying something. The one's been abused looks, why is that mom not close to her children? You see, our eyes are pulled into our history, into things that reminds us of our history. And maybe it's not the history in this lifetime. Maybe it's something way past. So on the ride here, home, and you get home and you say, what billboards attracted me? Why did you pass 20 billboards and only one attracted you? So you start to study yourself. And if that's a good billboard, hey, great. Now, if that's a billboard that incites drinking or whatever it may be, then you start understanding your shadow. You start understanding that little dark side. What does that have to do with Spiritism? Well, everything. If anyone's listening, everything. Because on question 919 on the Spirits book, Kardec asked the higher spirits, and he asked, what is the easiest, what is the most foolproof way to progress, to know that you're doing the right thing, for you to walk towards moral and progress and all of that? And the spirits say, who remembers the answer to that? Know thyself. So knowing yourself has everything to do with just this frame. We could stay here and just talk about it. And that is the origin of knowing where our evil intentions, our evil actions, where they lie. Now, the way I do a lecture is I have a whole bunch of things, but we get to them as we get to them, and if we don't, then we don't. We just go as far as we can go. So there's always that question of, is there a beginning of anything evil? Does evil have a source? So I'm going to show this little video. It's only a few seconds. And that's pretty interesting in what they say.
Nun werde ich euch beweisen, dass Gott, wenn es ihn gibt, böse ist. Hat Gott alles, was existiert, erschaffen? Wenn Gott alles erschaffen hat, dann hat er auch das Böse geschaffen. Das bedeutet, Gott ist böse.
Herr Professor, existiert Kälte?
Was für eine Frage soll das sein? Natürlich existiert die Kälte. War euch noch nie kalt?
Nein, in der Tat, Herr Professor, die Kälte existiert nicht. Nach den Gesetzen der Physik ist das, was wir als kalt empfinden, nur das Fehlen von Wärme. Und existiert Dunkelheit, Herr Professor?
Selbstverständlich existiert sie.
Nein, sie ist nur das Fehlen von Licht. Wir können das Licht messen, aber die Dunkelheit nicht. Das Böse existiert nicht, genau wie die Kälte und die Dunkelheit. Gott hat das Böse nicht geschaffen. Es ist das Ergebnis dessen, was Gottes Hand noch nicht berührt hat.
So it's not known for sure if this really happened with Albert Einstein, but we get the point. What is evil? And that's one of the questions that we must ask. One can say that evil is the absence of good, as cold is the absence of heat. And that's exactly what, that little movie explained. So people may say, well, but the air conditioning is on. Isn't there a source of cold? Well, for those who work with air conditioning or any kind of thermodynamics will know that there is no source of cold. What the air conditioning is doing is taking out the heat. And that's how our body works. We don't produce cold. When we feel cold, it's because the heat is escaping from our body. So does heat have a source? Absolutely. Look at the sun. Look at the fire. So there is a source of heat. Goodness and evil is the same thing. There is no source of evil. There is not a devil or whatever you want to call. There is no creature created by God to incite evil on earth. And that's the beauty of Spiritism. It's the beauty of knowing this, that there can never be an evil source of anything. What there is the absence of goodness. So when we don't practice love, we leave this vacuum for bad things to happen. In the Spirit's book, there's a question that I love it. It says that we're not only responsible for all the good things that we do, but also we are responsible for all the bad things that happen that we could have done something and we did not. So there lies more on the origins of evil than anything in these days. When we do nothing, when we stay in that status quo, I don't want to get involved. Why don't we get involved? Because we don't want to be criticized. There's a lot of work to be involved, to any good causes. There's a lot of work to do volunteer work, right? So when we do nothing, when we see someone being bullied, when we see someone with a flat tire and no cell phones, when we see anything, any act, and we do nothing because we don't want to get involved, are we responsible then? Or are we, well, you didn't do it. You didn't bully, so what do you guys think? Are we the same way responsible then? Absolutely. Oh, that's, by the way, is Genesis, is on Genesis chapter 3, item A. Does God, or did God create evil? God did not create evil. He established the laws, which are always good, because he is good. The spirits would have been completely happy had they faithfully observed the law since the beginning. So think about it. We're all created simple, ignorant, but then we have this amazing thing called free will. We can do whatever we want. In a relative sense, because your freedom kind of ends where you infringe somebody else's freedom as well, and that's why we have laws. That's why we need laws. Eventually, we won't need laws because we'll obey a higher sense of justice. But for now, it was our choice. And it's amazing to know that. At the same time that it can be a terrifying experience knowing that you're in control of your life, it's also liberating. Because if you think that you're suffering, you can also know that you somehow brought that upon yourself by deviating from the law of God at some point. Maybe not in this lifetime. But why does that bring you a sense of relief? Because you know you're in control of changing things. Because at any point that you want, you can take back control. And that also tells you, I don't need to blame anybody else. In Spiritists, we can't blame people. We know that. You can't say, I'm this way because of somebody else. I'm in a bad mood because my dad put me in a bad mood, or my boss yelled at me. You're in a bad mood because you chose to give in to the same. Isn't that how the obsessors finds us? The easy, accessible way to us? If we have a 3-plug and we want to put in a 2, does it work? As much as you want. We know Brazilians are ingenious, so we'll break one and try to. But for the most part, it won't fit. So as long as I don't want to, I will not allow your sour face to contaminate my day, it won't. It's a matter of choice. It's a matter of, I want to progress from here. I want to have a good day. If we wake up and that's our prayer, thank you, God. I want to have a good day. Help me. Stick with me all day. I guarantee you have a good day. So what are the causes and the origins of evil? The imperfection of the spirits that here incarnate is the origin of evil on earth. So this is in the booklet, and I think every Spiritist center has what is Spiritism. It's so small, and everybody should read it. And this is in chapter 3. So it's really due to our imperfections. So should we blame ourselves because we're not there yet? We're not that angel that we want to be? No, because we're still imperfect. We're still in the works. And that gives us a lot of hope to know that if I commit an evil act, that does not denominate me as an evil person. I'm not giving apologies for evil acts. I'm saying evil people in reality don't exist. What exists is people ignorant of love. So when we see someone, and we see a lot of times when they apprehend a great criminal or a terrorist, what happens? Where with this guy that just shot so many people in Las Vegas, you see people coming together to pray for the victims. But at the same time, you see a movement of people, God bless you. At the same time, you see a movement of people who want to condemn and throw rocks and hate on the person who did that. Now, if all I have is hate, what do I need? I already know what hate is. what do I need? I need love. So those people need to be prayed more for. The victims will get so much prayer. But if we can only concentrate our prayers for those who need the most, and those who need the most are the ones that are ignorant. They're absent of love, of knowing what love is. So when someone comes to me and yell at me, and I've had people put their finger or say, oh, this and this, or people talk behind your back and say you're doing everything wrong, what does that tell me? You need to love them most. What did Jesus say at the cross? Forgive them because they know not what they do. Because they don't understand what love is. And the only way for us to teach love and goodness is by exemplifying, is by showing that, yeah, I have that in my heart. What am I going to teach someone that needs love if I just hate on them or if I just criticize them, right? Then we get here, and I wanted to put a piece of this little girl because it's a very interesting case. Her name is Beth. This little girl, I need you to know and understand a little bit of the background of Beth. And this is whoever's going to psychology eventually, you're going to understand and study sociopaths or psychopaths. And this little girl, unfortunately, she was, and I say unfortunately for the event, and we all know that there are no victims in this world. Nobody's a victim, correct? We know that we have consequences. But this little girl, she was born into a sexually abusive father. And he abused her in the most horrific way until she was 18 months old. We're talking a year and a half. And she had a little brother, same thing with him. And eventually this little girl and their brother were adopted by this couple who were in a church, and they were very, Christ-following people. They adopted this little girl, and she began to show certain behaviors. She began to show very aggressive sexual behavior. She begins to kill little animals as a very little young girl. She began to tell her brother that she wanted to kill her brother. At some point, they had to put all the knives away in the house, and they had to lock her door during the night. So they made sure that this little girl wasn't doing anything. And there's a reason why I'm bringing this, because we can't talk about Spiritism if we don't bring real life acts. If we don't bring real life into it, we're not going to be able to really relate. So I wanted to bring one of the worst cases and just a little bit of an interview between her and her psychiatrist. So we just get a little glimpse of what many people may say, this is an evil child. And there's a point to this.
Are people afraid of you, Beth?
Uh-huh.
Who's afraid of you, Beth?
John.
Your brother. And why is your brother afraid of you?
Because I hurt him so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Of hurting John? Of you hurting John?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they afraid that you might hurt them?
Yep.
Would you, Beth?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you do to him, Beth?
Stab him.
You ever stick pins in people?
Mm-hmm.
Who?
My brother.
Okay. Do you do it a little bit or a lot?
A lot.
Okay. And what are you trying to do to your brother?
Kill him.
Why do you want your brother to die?
Because I was hurt so bad, and I don't want to be around people.
So this is a little girl that was 6 years old at the time of the interview. So the answer that we get from that interview is what? Why do I do this? And we like to believe that people that were abused would never abuse, and those who were never hurt will never hurt because they know the feeling, but that's not really what statistics tells us. And we know that a great amount of people that were hurt will continue to hurt. And how do we break the cycle? We break the cycle by breaking it, by showing it the other way. And when Jesus comes and tells us to give the other face, to show the other side, he's not telling you, put your face to get a big punch on it. He's telling you to break that cycle of hate, to break that cycle of evil by showing the other side of it. So if us as Spiritists cannot show the other side, who else will? If we as Christ followers will not show the other side, and when we see someone exhibit those behaviors, we'll condemn them, who will? Who will forgive them and show them, no, There is a way to break the cycle. Someone hurt you so bad, well, you don't have to hurt somebody else that bad. You can break that cycle. And that's how we stop this movement of evil. And that's how we stop. And Emmanuel, he was as a spiritual guide of Chico Xavier. He told Chico that we can know, we have an idea when this world will begin to truly switch into the next phase is when there are no more wars. So we know if we're close enough or not. And how do we end wars? By ending them, by not continuing it. We can't even stay a day sometimes without arguing, without imposing our views, there are two kinds of people who listen to you. Some people will listen so they can rebut it, or they're already thinking of what they're going to say next, right? In a normal conversation, if you're talking to someone, they're listening, but just because they're preparing what they're going to say. And then there's another kind of listener, the one that wants to understand what you're saying. And once we switch that, I'm listening because I'm already thinking in my head what you're saying wrong, and I want to show you that I'm better and my point is better than yours. Or I'm listening to you because I care, and I really want to hear what you have to say. And I want to learn from you, or I want to share my experience. That's how we break the cycle. When we invite someone to a Spiritist center and we say, I want you to feel the way I feel when I'm there. Or when you say, I want you to study a book with me, which one do you think will convince more to come? When you bring your emotion, when you bring your understanding, and when you come to people and you say, I understand you're hurting, I see your pain, I think there's a place with so much knowledge that will at least help you understand why you're feeling this way. This is how we're going to fill Spiritist centers. Not by inviting to a great lecture of a great, doctorate level, I don't know. It's with the feelings. It's breaking the cycle of evil that we're going to bring this love. And that's what we're here to do. How is it then in this world? The wicked so often have power over the good. And we always say that, right? We say, evil always kind of, I don't want to say it, but it seems like it always wins. Well, this is in the Spirit's book, 932. And here's the answer. That is a consequence of the weakness of the good. The wicked are intriguing and audacious. The good are often timid. When the latter shall be determined to have the upper hand, they will have it. So it's all about determination. And you see, when there's a movie that exalts violence, do they play on that violence or not? When they put that little, this is coming up, this new movie, and they will show the worst scenes, blood splattering everywhere. But when there's a good movie about, an enlightening movie, it's something good, even the music changes, right? And they put this calming music, almost you're like, so peaceful, I don't even want to look, I want to close my eyes, right? When you start showing goodness, I used to work at a hospital, Catholic hospital, and there was the one day I was working, there was an incident with the school in Connecticut. There was a shooting in the school in Connecticut, and I was there doing some rounds, and all of a sudden, all the TVs were on it, and you could see the people because I was on the oncologist section, and you could see that session, the people were stressed, and the machines, you could hear beeping, you could see the level of stress going up. So what did I do? I went into the rooms every time that someone was kind of sleeping, I'd go and switch the channels. And that was my new job that day. I just switched every single TV channel. I didn't want people to even know, because some people were sleeping. When they woke up, the channel was already showing this horrific scene. And I'm not saying to be ignorant on what's going on with the world, but that wasn't really the time, I didn't think, And when we start seeing all this commotion around an evil act, one of the nuns told me, she was there and she says, Debbie, that's a great thing. Let's shut off all these TVs and let's put on different things, showing up on TV. And I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a channel that was just good things, and a channel that would just show, this person just got their citizenship, or this person just opened a new Spiritist center, or good things. And then I said to her, but unfortunately, I think the evil, it just has this attraction. And she answered me, that's because nobody tries. Nobody is audacious enough to put up a channel that's only a good news channel. that just came to me as a nun with some boxing gloves right there. And then I said from that day, I'm not going to propagate anything evil, and it has to stop with me. And that is the only source that we're going to stop this. If someone gossips to me, seriously, I get a headache, I kind of switch the subject. I'm not saying I'm there yet. I'm doing it. I'm trying. I'm trying my best here. But I try to. And that's what Spiritists are, right? We know that Kardec said it's really that power that you have to really dominate your evil inclinations and all the things, the moral things that you know are wrong, and you just want to like, no, I really want to do it right. That's what being a Spiritist is. It's not about, oh, wow, did you see that lecture? Wow, she must be so enlightened. No, come live with me for a week. You're going to see I'm not enlightened. But then, none of us are, right? We're all walking that way. But when I know that, ooh, my tongue is itching to just answer that person, and then I do that, Chico Xavier used to say, put some water, take a drink, but don't swallow. And that's their peace water. So don't swallow. When someone says something, he would just, and just keep that water in there. So when we start doing that, that's what we're doing. And when we start, because it says, when you want to, goodness will prevail. It's really a matter of us wanting it. Has man of himself the means of distinguishing what is good from what is evil? Can we use that? And that's when you see a number. It's a Spirit's book, okay? So that's question 631. So do we really know what is good and evil? Do we have, the way to know something being good and evil? What do you guys think? Yeah, we know? What do they say? Yes. When he believes in God and desires to do what is right. So that desires, I did that and read. And that's key, because sometimes we're just, we can kind of get lazy about it. I know what it is, but it's too hard. But when we desire it and we know what the right thing is, we'll do it. We'll know what to do. Are good and evil absolute for all men? Kardec asks. Well, good is always good, and evil is always evil. Whatever a man's position may be, the difference is in the degree of his responsibility. So it really is all about how much are you responsible, because how much knowledge do you have of that? A nurse is a lot more responsible if someone has a heart attack here to help, correct? That's why there's a Good Samaritan law. If you don't know what to do but you try, they can't sue you and say, well, you just made it worse. But a nurse will be held a little more accountable in the court of law because she should have known. She knew what to do and maybe she did it wrong. So that goes the same for the knowledge of good and evil. As man is subject to error, may he not be mistaken in his appreciation of good and evil and believe himself to be doing right when in reality he is doing wrong. How many of us can say, oh, I thought I did the right thing. I thought I was doing the right thing. And now I realize. Jesus said, and what is that beautiful phrase that we always know? Do unto others as we want them to do unto us. How many days do we go without remembering this phrase? How many months? How many years? If we remember this every day, and when a friend calls and a friend says, hey, Julie, you know what? Is there a Julie? Ooh. And a friend says, hey, Julie, there's going to be a prom coming up. I don't think we should sit on that table there because you know who's going to be there, right? And you get that call. And now in your mind, you kind of, that person, I don't know if I want to sit with her. And yeah, really. Julie, what do you do? Do you sit with that person that your friends are kind of like, I don't know, she's not the popular one. I don't want her at my table. Or do we stand up for her? Do you stand up for her and say, no, nobody really likes her. Maybe she should sit with us. I don't want her to be alone. What do you think, Julie? Put her on the spot since your name's Julie, see? You give her the benefit of the doubt. You do. And you do this because, again, if I was the other girl that everybody's ostracizing, if I was that girl that couldn't speak English and everybody's making fun of her because she doesn't, would I want someone to come help me? Would I want someone to come and say, you know what, sit with me, that's okay. Someday you'll learn, and you know what, you'll be the director of communications of the White House, who knows? And everyone's going to be looking at you and say, hey, I made a mistake on that one, huh? I could use a favor right now. So when we bring this knowledge and we say, it's not conditioned. What Jesus says, it's not conditioned. So when someone yells at me and this phrase pops in my head, it doesn't excuse me to say, well, he yelled first. It immediately puts me in a position to say, would I want to be yelled at? You see, when we switch, when we shift the way we look at life, we shift our behavior. Then we say, I'm not going to yell back. You know why? Because I don't want somebody yelling at me. It's not because he yelled at me, because that's not enough to make me yell back. I'm better than that. And that's how we win over this evil. If he who profits by another's wrongdoing, even though that he took no part in its commission, as guilty as though he had taken part of it. So if someone does something and you took an advantage of that, if a cashier gives you the wrong change and you keep it, but it was her mistake, it wasn't your mistake, are you as responsible as one who went and when she was looking away took the money out of the drawer? Well, let's see what the spirits say. Yes, it's equivalent to doing it. Ooh, another part that we have to work on then. Every time that a government or every time that a governor or a politician takes advantage of his position, of his title, to do something for himself instead of for the people that he represents, is he as responsible? Yes. And those who vote to him because they also will take some advantage of it, are they as just responsible? So you see, the Spirit's book couldn't be more actual. It couldn't be more real life. And I tell everyone, and soon I'm going to be doing a lecture on suicide, and I tell everyone, if you truly study the Spirit's book, you will never take your own life. You will never commit suicide because you will understand. And I'm not just saying reading it. I'm saying really understanding it. And that's the importance. If I had to give one book to anyone, give the Spirit's book. So that's the cashier example, right? And in Brazil, this was I don't know where this was. I just took a random example. But so this is a hypothetical question. I want you all to think about it. This cart full of carrying meats, some ribs, some barbecue. If you're a vegetarian, just imagine amazing vegetables, okay? But let's say this, and it's a temperature-sensitive truck, and it flipped. And some people were driving by and they saw this truck flipped. And it was a hot day of summer. And you're going home and it's Sunday. And you saw all this meat. And then you think, what? And then we think, what? Churrasco, barbecue, right? So people were stopping, and of course they were taking all kinds of meats and all of that. What do? Do you take it? Do you not take it? Well, it's sensitive. It's hot. You're hungry. The driver, he's okay. It's just the truck flipped. It's hot. Now think about it. We just learned what? If you partake on an action that is not a good action, you are just as responsible as having caused that whatever the unfortunate event, let's put it that way. So can we justify it and just say, well, it's hot and it's just going to go to waste, right? Is that what we do? We justify sometimes our evil actions. We use justifications. It's actually a psychological way to deal with your guilt, is you justify it. Now, could these people get together and say, hey, where were you delivering this? We can all get together and bring it there. Is that an alternative? Now, what kind of people would think of this alternative? Those a little higher up there, right? Those lower would be what? Fighting? You think fights would break out depending on the place? For more than enough that you needed? Absolutely. So why don't we do more good? And now we're getting to the psychological aspects of why do good people commit bad actions. So why don't we do more good? Well, there's a few psychological factors. Anonymity, obedience, dehumanization, tediousness, and indifference. If I have to say I did a few different studies, and different people might have a different take on this, so different order, doesn't matter the order here. But think about it. What makes people apparent good people commit evil acts? First of all, in Question on the Spirits book, question 456, Kardec asked the spirits, do the spirits are they able to see everything? They do. They do. So is there such thing as being anonymous? Is there any? There isn't. It's a big illusion, right? But when people believe that they're not being watched, what do you think happens? Right? A lot of the crimes are committed because of what? Well, there was no cameras in that place. Why do we put so many cameras in this world now? Right? Why do we record everything? Because someone's watching you. Do you think these days you can go from here to home without being recorded or taking a picture of your license plate, anything? Your phone even tells you, right? I know that now. I just learned that it could be off, and it tells there's still a way to know where you were. I have clients that follow their husbands, wives, and they have all kinds of stuff. And I say, okay, we got a lot of work to do here, right? Because of the possession. This isn't love. This is possession. And this is also a problem that you have with yourself. It's a problem that you have to understand. But going back, that is why so many wars are broken. That is why soldiers dress a lot of times camouflaging, because the reason they attack, and the most fierce, and I'm not saying a soldier defending his country or fighting for a just cause. What I'm saying is when cruel acts happen in the battlefield are usually by most that are anonymous. Nobody can see me, so I can do whatever I want. So we have to be very careful, because if we're going to study the spirit realm, we understand that there is no such thing as being anonymous. We're always being watched. And who's going to judge us anyway? Ourselves. When we discarnate, and everybody here has a number, I'll tell you that. Everybody here has a little piece of paper, imaginary paper, with a number. And there's 20 people, and one is number 1. Maybe 2 will go together. Maybe 1 won't make it home tonight. Just kidding. Well, maybe the other one thought there was only 5 years. In reality, hey, guess what? You got 50 more, right? So you don't know. But when you do get there, the spirits tell us that the most regret that we have is the knowledge of how much time we wasted, how much time we could have been doing the right thing, and we didn't. Because we become conscious of, that was such a little problem. In the case of suicide, we see a lot of times that people think that it's a solution. I always say, it's a permanent solution for a temporary problem. Because all our problems are temporary. The solution, that might linger for many, many, many more lives. The second one is the obedience. Has anyone ever studied Stanley Milgram or have heard of this man? A lot of, I got my youth there. They know. So Stanley Milgram, he was an amazing studious and a scholar, psychologist, and he did a study back in the 60s. And what he did is this. Now try to imagine, because it was pretty interesting. This study has been replicated many times, and they all come up with a similar result. Now the point is, he wanted to know if good people, if people just like us here, came here, everybody looks great, everybody did something good today, if we were able to commit an atrocity, such as those in the Holocaust, can we say that we would do things as they did back then, as the Nazi soldiers? Would you do things that they did today? Everybody would answer no, right? Everybody would say, no, I could never do that. I could never harm someone. I could never kill someone because somebody else, some megalomaniac, decides that, that's the right thing to do. But here's what he did. So this is Stanley. Well, not him. He hired someone to do this. There was a man that looked very official with a lab coat, and he looked like he had authority over people. And what happened is he recruited different people, all men, around 45 years old, around there. I don't remember in details the case. I see too many I don't remember all of it. But this is the core. So he recruited, he was going to say, look, I want to test these people on their memory. I want to see if they remember things or if they don't remember things. So I'm doing this study, and I want you to participate. And you're going to get paid whether you continue or not. But here's your $5, and let's do this. So he brings this, the people into one by one. So think of you. I would bring you. I have a lab coat, and I would bring you here, and I would say, Samantha. So this is what happens. This man here, he's going to test this other man on memory skills. So what happens is I'm going to hook you up, and that's the machine, to this machine that will send electrical shock to him every time that he says the wrong word. So you're going to say a few phrases or a few words, and you're going to ask him to repeat. Now, mind you, there's going to be a wall. He's not going to be able to see you. So this person would be in a bathroom in that case. And every time that he's going to hear you, and you will hear him. So your job is to read these words and then ask him to repeat them. And again, it's a lot more in depth. I'm just giving you some of it. And every time that he repeats it wrong, you have to press this button, and he'll get a little shock. Okay? So that's your job. So you accept it. You're kind of uncomfortable with it. And the shock went from 15 volts to 400 volts. Now, anybody knows electricity here a little bit? Okay, 15 volts. Okay, just one of those, 300 volts. That can seriously hurt someone. 300 volts, not a pretty thing. 450 volts, 400 volts can kill. It's a fatal shot. So let's begin imagining that you're here. And I start telling you to tell the other guy a few words. And now he starts making mistakes. And every time he makes a mistake, you have to heighten the shock. How much would you go? When do you say enough is enough? Now, these people, mind you, sometimes they felt uncomfortable. And they're like, I don't know. This guy keeps getting it wrong. And I'm already up to, 200 volts here. And I can hear him making noises of pain. And I don't know. And then this lab guy, right, this lab coat, he would just tell him, well, the experiment, it requires you. I require you to continue with the experiment. You signed up for this. You have to keep going. And what do you think they did? Well, here's the results. All of them gave 300 volts shock. All of them. 300 volts is enough to cause some serious pain. Some of those participants felt extremely nervous. Some of them were sweating. Some of them were fidgeting. They didn't want to continue. But somebody with a lab coat told them that it's necessary for you to continue. Now remember, when they signed up for this, they knew that they could stop at any time. They would still get paid. They all did. And how many? Do you think anybody would continue until the lethal dose? What do you guys think? Well, think about it. They're getting the money regardless. So 40 people, right? 2/3, just about 2/3 gave the mortal shot. 65% gave the 450 volts. Now, these are people just like us. This is in the 60s. So what's the importance of this? What does influence people to do things? Do authority influence you to do things? If you believe someone has authority over you and they tell you to do whatever goes against your moral, do you do it or do you not do it? And this experiment brought us this knowledge that we like to believe that we don't do it, that we would not do it. But here, 65% gave a shot of 400 volts that they knew would kill. So then we think about it. What does that have to do with Spiritism? What does obedience have to do with Spiritism? Who are we here to obey? Correct? And then when Kardec asks, where is the law of God? Where is God? Where is this law written? Who remembers the answer? In our conscience. So does that have everything to do with it? It's in our conscience. So do we want to follow this straight path? But what if your conscience gives you bad consequences? What if doing the right thing brings you not so comfortable things? Do you still do it, or you take it? So you see, that's another component of why good people do evil things. They go against their conscience. And if we're to study this amazing Spirits book that tells us that God is in our conscience and we want to go with God and with his laws, then take the consequences. Is it as simple as that? Well, maybe you won't be comfortable. Maybe you will lose something that you don't want to lose. But do you want to do what is right, or do you want to do what is more comfortable? And that brings us to reflect. If we think I'm a material thing, living in a material world, and this material is all I have, there is no soul, then you see the problem here. When we live as materialists, there's no consequences. When we shift into spirituality and we understand that we are spiritual beings living in a material body for a certain amount of time, then we have a whole different optic on what is the right thing to do. So the next thing, and we're just about there, I'm not going to do the prison, but dehumanization. There was the Tutsi and the Hutus. They were two different tribes in Africa. And at one point, they were rival tribes. At one point, the Hutus were losing. They were kind of like, it was a civil fight. And the Tutsi said, the Hutus, they're just cockroaches. They're not humans. They're just cockroaches. In 100 days, I wrote it down because I thought 800,000 of them were dead. People killed 800,000 in 100 days because they classified their other fellow human beings as cockroaches, as an animal. So once you take the human element out of humanity, you're more capable of doing evil things. This is in Rwanda, that's when it happened. Did we do that with the Holocaust? When we mentioned that they were just rats, they weren't human. And people felt, well, then I'm not doing something to my fellow brother and sister. We did this as slaves were not seen to have soul. They were animals. Once we classify one as an animal and we start treating them as an animal, we're a lot more capable of doing atrocities. Now we go back to Spiritism, that we say that we are all spirits. We are all a little piece of the divine. All of us are made by the same hands, by the same Father. Then we start to really understand what we're here to do. Then we start stopping seeing the colors and the sex and the gender and the height and the body types. And we start to look at people as, we're all together in this. Tediousness. I'm sorry about the images, but this is what is real in the world. When we have nothing to do, when we're bored, and here we see pictures of Abu Ghraib, when the soldiers were just bored, and then they had ideas. Let's do something with the prisoners. And we see a few things that they did, and we all remember these cases. Many of us still remember these news. But boredom. And again, what does that have to do with Spiritism? What is the number one thing that we have to do to combat depression, to combat any of those thoughts? Work. And when we have to work in the cause of good things, that is the number one thing that can help us to achieve a different moral, to achieve that freedom from depression, from suicidal thoughts, is to work. We see the book Paul and Stephen when Abigail comes back, and one of her words, one of her counsels to Paul is to work. Indifference. When we see animals as just animals and we don't care, when we start seeing, this is one of the native Brazilian, in Brazil, one of the Indians, and they put fire on him when he was sleeping outside, and someone came and put fire on him because he was a native Indian. What does he matter? He can't vote in their minds. Doesn't know anything, doesn't speak the language. When you start being indifferent, that's his name, Gaudino Jesus dos Santos. When you see a homeless person and you don't say hello, when he's too little for you to say, good morning. Sometimes we're too busy. Sometimes life doesn't allow us to stop and say hello to everyone. But when you can do that to one person, just to show that they're human, they're part of us, you're not indifferent to their suffering. A lot of times they need less food and more talk. I don't know how many times I go to New York and I go to offer someone some food and no, thank you, I don't need it. And I just sit there, I just drop it. I've been so late to so many lectures, I won't even tell you. Because every time I go to a lecture, God has a funny way of doing things sometimes. He puts a person that wants to talk to me, and they're homeless, and they're sitting, and they're full of troubles, and I sit down, and I'm sitting there, and one of these days someone's going to see this, and they're like, what is Debbie doing there? Just, with the little cup next to her and all of that. But I sit down, and then we start talking, and I say, hey, and then you talk their language. And then people connect, and they know that not everybody's indifferent. And that is another way why good people commit evil acts. When they begin to see others as not mattering. And we all matter. We see the senior citizens. How many just throw them? Oh, you're no good. I can't take any advantage of any of your skills anymore. You can't offer me money or shelter. Now I have my own house. I have my own family. And they're forgotten. That's what causes good people to commit evil acts. So why reincarnate? Remember this girl here? Who can recognize her? Yes. 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 That is Beth. Beth is now a registered nurse. She is doing amazing. And why? Because somebody believed that she was only doing that because she was so hurt. And we only commit hurtful acts because we have been so hurt. And we only commit evil acts because we have not known love. And she works at a neonatal care facility. She shares her story. She shares how amazing she loves her brother. And she is a person that says, if that couple that received me as adopted children, knowing what they knew, and she went through intense psychotherapy. She went through intense help, but she did it. And this is why I wanted to put, because this is an example of one of those that you could say, this child is lost. There is nothing I can do. And this is someone who is such an amazing person. And we see amazing acts. And we see here during Sandy, people that had perhaps a generator and offered anybody to come in and recharge their batteries. And I still have a bottle of water in my house, and I want to share it with you. And people who come at stations, such as this police officers in New York, and saw a homeless man with no shoes, and measured up and sized up his own boots, took them off and put it on his feet. And that is why the world still shows hope. And the world is such an amazing place. So many full of good people. People like this man who saw this person. And he did not want to just go out to the store and buy this beautiful pair of shoes. He took his own. And here, it's yours from now on. And it shows hope. And we do know that people are good because we're all made out of this God who is good. And we're here in the Spiritist Center. Why? Because we want to learn how to take all this goodness out of us. Because if we're going with Kardec, and Kardec says that evil is present because it is loud and it talks. And goodness is meek. It's quiet. But when we make goodness much more, then this world will show. And we're going to those transformations that we so kindly wait. And we see how little kids these days are doing these amazing acts. Some of the most amazing spirits are being born all the time. And they see a little dog. And they say, you know what? I'll hold on to that little grass there. And you hold on to my hand. And I'm going to hold on to his paw. And he takes this little dog out. And these are acts that we see every day. And we see men and women of the armed forces out there. And some of them are fighting with their own conscience. And they get there because they have to be there. They have this world still at a place that this still happens. But then what do? They still share their candy with the little ones. When parents send them their gift bags and all of those boxes, they take the things and they share among others. They have never seen a piece of gum or a little candy bar. Would a man's own effort always suffice to enable him to vanish his evil tendencies? Kardec asks at 909. Yes, very slight ones are often all that is needed. It is the will that is wanting. Alice, how few of you make any serious efforts to vanquish those tendencies? It is the little things. It is the little acts that we do. If we can come out of here and not remember anything that I said, and it doesn't matter because I don't say many important things, but if we can remember what Kardec has presented, to just really bring out the goodness that you have inside of you, because you do have it. And when you want to really understand why do good people commit evil acts, it is because of the lack of love. And that we learn that the lack of love is nothing else than ignorance. And ignorance can only be combated with knowledge and will. And if we can bring as many people as we can to understand this, to love this, with our examples, with our kindness, with our compassion, then we're going to begin this new era that we also hope. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for this beautiful presentation. All the information that is good for us to learn, good for us to remember, and be reminded to exercise as well. So it's an amazing reminder for all of us. And we always like to say, share it, right? Not only share it with the words, but share it with the good examples. Little things, nothing major. We're not climbing Mount Everest, as Chico Xavier also mentioned, that we often think that doing good is to do the amazing, great things. No, it's just this starts with the small things, and it becomes we become accustomed to it, then it becomes a habit, and then it goes on and on and on, and we like to multiply into greater things. So it starts small. This is the moment that we have the opportunity to ask questions, to make comments, or perhaps say a highlight of what we learned tonight or what we have seen tonight. So we open the microphone for some questions and comments, please. Paula.
Okay, thank you. No, I really liked your talk, and my subtitle for it is Examination of Conscience, having been raised Catholic. My general question is, what would you suggest in raising children so that they are able to be more assertive and courageous, really, in the instances that you showed, where it's difficult when it's an authority figure, or maybe you feel too shy to do something?
Sure. And that's an important question, because sometimes there's so much around, so many influences around the youth especially. I used to run a youth group as well. And the youth would come to me and they would ask that question. They say, how do I resist? How do I fight back when I'm not in a position to fight back? Do we let myself get beaten? Or the parents, what do I do? And I thought about it, and I think about it, and all the psychologists that I've learned from, and all the books I've read, it comes back to my grandmother's advice. And my grandmother passed it on to my mom, and my mom passed it on to me. And what I have to say is, do not allow anybody to intimidate you. I think as parents, when we teach our children that nobody has the power to intimidate them, if they understand that God is with them, when you build that up in them, and when you tell them that God is so good and He is so strong and He is with you, and even at the moments that you think no one is there and everything is abandoned, do not allow anybody to intimidate you. Don't think that anyone has a power to make you feel little. I always thought the consequences, people are pleasers, people want to be pleasers, especially children, they want to please. And we see a lot of abuse as well, because children underreport a lot of things that happen to them. They don't want to say it because they don't want to tell on someone. And when you come in and you say, And I think that's why Spiritist centers, they focus so much on the little ones. And when they tell them that you carry inside of you something so sacred, you carry inside of you a power that you don't even have that you have. And once you have that choice to make, you can always consult your mind. Say a prayer. Really think. And I tell children, pray and really think, is that the right thing to do? And above all, be an example. You know, I see a lot of parents telling children not to drink and their fridge is full of alcohol. And I tell a lot of parents with a cigarette in their mouth they're telling their children not to smoke. And I think that we have to also have a certain authority to be able to talk the talk. We have to also walk the walk. I guess that would be one of the things, you know, to not let them get swayed so much, is to be in a position of authority. And if you're still struggling and you really can't be, teach them that nobody has authority over them, moral authority over them. You know, that there's the laws of man and of God. But if we don't teach our children the spiritual side of things, they're going to be doomed to believe that it's all unfair and everything is unjust. And the only way I think they'll understand that there is justice in whatever it is by deepening their spirituality. So I say, children, get spiritualized, get more in contact with what this is all about. And I think that's the only way to break it. And that's not me saying, you know, it's really break the cycle of materialism.
Thank you. Next question. Yes.
That was a very great talk. About this humanization. I'm bothered by that because if I think it's okay, if it's an animal, lower, and those that we hate most, we learn to hate most, cockroach. You know, it's okay. So we have to change from that level, and even that, go beyond that to the plants, to the vegetable kingdom. And I work in the lab. We are so concerned about the pain of those little animals that if all that knowledge would go to the common population, this world would be much better, you know, because they don't know how to complain that they are in pain. So we have to figure even out more. So this awareness that it's okay for the cockroach, we have to change with the kids. I know we were doing this bad thing when we were kids, but we were allowed. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, in the 1400s, you know what the main way of entertainment was? Do you want to know? Well, they would sit around a fire, except they would burn cats. They would take cats and just burn them because they would make a special hissing sound. And that's, you know, they would make their conversation more lively. Things have gotten better. And we have to know that, thank God, it is a progression. And with Spiritism, we know that things are getting better. Even though at times we stop and we see how this very question you brought, you know, and there's a dilemma, moral dilemma. And we know that the American Psychological Association has proper ethical rules in regards to dealing with animals and how to lessen their suffering. And we know that diabetes medications and this kind of medications, it does need the sacrifice of some animals in order to save humans. And the Spirits book, it's amazing. Again, there's an entire chapter dealing with that. But again, bring in awareness. Maybe at this point, we're not at the point yet of eliminating all, let's say, lab experiments with animals. Just an example. But we are already at an awareness of not being cruel. You see, back then, cruelty was a lot more exalted. Now it's not about cruelty. We can know that, yeah, it's an animal, so we're going to sacrifice it in order for me to eat. We still do that, right? A lot of times. But we're walking because now at least we want a less painful. We care now how an animal dies. You see how there's already a shift. Before it didn't matter. It was actually enjoyable. now there's a shift in this knowledge. And we're going to get there. I mean, eventually we know. And like you said, we go through different stages. A spirit is born as of God's will, and it goes through different stages. It goes through the mineral, it goes to the vegetative, it goes through the animal, and it goes into the human, and eventually the angelic. So once we respect the animal kingdom, we're respecting, again, not spirits because it's not a spirit yet, but it's spirit in formation. So we're really respecting a future human being. So with this thought is this knowledge of we can't dehumanize. We can't just say it's an animal so it deserves it, or we can't, because in the end, every spirit that's going through all of these kingdoms eventually will be an enlightened spirit. So once we think and we shift this mind into that, we're going to respect all beings. We're not going to get home and kick a chair. Like, I don't like to destroy things. Like, I see those home shows, and this is an example, again, as a real life. When we see those home shows and it's renovation day, right? And then this is demo day, and you see the demolition. People have this joy in breaking things. And you see they're already, their more lower primitive side coming out because they enjoy breaking it. And there are those who don't like breaking things. Even if I have to destroy this podium to build a new one, I can already kind of think of where I can donate, or maybe this. You see, you start shifting, and this is the movement. This is the progression that we talk about. When I stop enjoying even to kick a rock, just to kick a rock, but move it or go around it. This is the movement that we want to respect all kingdoms. And when we say thank you to Mother Earth, and thank you for giving me this amazing vegetable, and I know that the seeds will produce a new one, and I don't need my fellow little brother someday will be my brother, this little animal, when I understand that. But for now, I'm grateful for your life. That's already a shift. And I think that's the movement. When we start not dehumanizing, not seeing people as cockroaches, because even cockroaches, eventually, not the cockroach, but that animates the cockroach eventually will progress as well. So it deserves the respect. So that is the beautiful movement that Spiritism teaches us.
The two who already asked a question has two more questions. Thank you, Deborah. Anybody else before we? Okay, all right, and then we pass to you ladies.
No, because you said about the experiment that the person gave the chalk, right? But did they really kill those people?
Oh, okay, great clarification on the experiment. First of all, it was not a real
Victim.
person,
Okay.
even on the other end. It was a machine that made sound.
Ah.
Okay, very important, because people would go home. Now, this is the thing. Afterwards, they interviewed. Yeah, they wouldn't allow it. But, I mean, the psychological pressure that these people suffered because they thought that they did it, that's tremendous for you to get out of this experiment thinking, oh, my goodness, I delivered this amount of shock. There was a lot of pressure on these people. But, again, remember that there was a wall, so I would never see the person that I was shocking. In reality, the other side was not, no one was getting shocked, and they believed that they were administering shock, but it was a machine that would just, it's hurting, my heart attack. It was a recording. So nobody was actually hurt, thank God. But again, Milgram wanted to know if, again, would we be capable of doing something, as today, in the standards, the code of ethics today would never allow for something, for an experiment because of psychological, you would have a lot of problems down the road, the experimenters. But again, it brings light into know thyself, 919. I read that question to the whole, go home and read that 919 Spirit's book from beginning to end. And then we know the importance of would I do it, and that kind of brings us to not judge people so much, because we're so quick in saying, I would never do that, and we use that phrase all the time, right? Like, I would never, ever do that. Well, do you really know yourself that well, So.
I only have a question because I appreciate your emphasis on good role modeling and respect for every creature, but I do have to ask this one. what is the evolutionary purpose of our country having a president now who is not demonstrating that?
And we know that every time, in every place, all the people have the person exactly that they deserve in that moment. And we're going here to either trials or tribulations. And if we're going to remember even the authoritative positions here that we talked about, the lab coats, sometimes, and regardless of political positions, sometimes, regardless of who we see as being in a position of power, do we morally, or can we accept our actions based on what the rule is? Or are we going with our conscience, or are we going to follow the rule of men? And now we know that there's laws of men and there's laws of God. So regardless if it's a president that tells me that the death punishment is legal, or that abortion is legal, right? Let's use that because it's doesn't matter. It could be our actual president. It could be, now, am I going to vote on this president that will legalize abortion? Or what are the premises of my vote, right? Now, not just that. Now, let's see that it's the opposite, and he incites something that's negative. You still have your choice. Nobody can take that away from you. And that is the whole beauty of knowing the moral laws of God, because those are the ones we have to obey. And once we study the third part of the Spirit's book that talks all about the 10, laws that we should really study about God, I don't think we have to worry about it. Who is president? Because it's in somehow you are being tested. Even with, remember we said, if someone has hate, what do they need? They need love. If that could be the only lesson that we need to learn, that is regardless, love the people that have the least. Now, there are many people that will love North Korea's president currently, correct? There are many people who agree with him and that love him. What is our purpose as Spiritists? To send love. To send love. So regardless, there are many people who will vote for the president right now. And not only that, can we imagine the position of someone that has power, what they have to go through? Because with more responsibility, right, with more knowledge, if you're in a position that you can influence people, you also have a lot of responsibilities. So what are people, regardless of political parties, what do we have to do? Instead of going to Facebook and bad-mouthing the other person, saying how horrible this president is, how amazing this president is, how whatever, bring out the positive. Say, you know what, your candidate, instead of bringing your candidate down, I'm going to bring mine up. And once we start doing that, then we start showing what's good in people. And it's a lot easier to point what doesn't work and what is evil or what is bad on the other guy. But once we elevate us, Bruce Lee, I used to be in karate and all that. Yeah. And Bruce Lee, once he asked one of the students, he took a chalk and he gave one of his students. And he said, here is a line of your enemy. You have a chalk. Show him how you can be bigger than them. What would you do? You have a chalk. A lot of people would go and do this. Now I'm bigger. Some people would take the eraser and would erase. The enlightened ones would take the chalk and we would do this. So we can be bigger than that.
Thank you. Yes, go.
Yeah, about this soul, not only that's how we slave the black people, but the women, even recently, they are allowed to abuse us because we didn't have soul. From where is coming this concept? Because I'm not completely raised Catholic. I don't know if the Buddhists have the same concept. I don't think so. But how this coming from, that if soul, not soul, is okay, not, what is that?
A lot of times it has to do with position of powers. We can see that, many people ask, why did Jesus incarnate as a man and not as a woman? Would he have any voice if he came as a woman? At that time, at that place. Today, still, women are having a hard time having a voice in many countries. And it's interesting because as Spiritists, we can say that we are born different sexes at different times. So if we are to believe that there are no victims, even when we see that women, in its generality, are in a position of disadvantage, we're talking politically, we're talking even owning their own bodies, even we see this, it's pretty clear in a lot of places, right? But if we are to say, if we come back as a man, what are you going to do? Remember that experiment? Are we going to now make those suffer for what they have made us suffer? So a lot of times, roles are reversed. We don't have to, sometimes we come and we incarnate at different genders, and we just propagate the problem. We just come back with a vengeance of what the other did to us. And that is the problem, and that's why we have to keep reincarnating. Once we break again this cycle, and once this belief, because and this is a lot of misinterpretation of a lot of texts. A lot of the scriptures, a lot of things were already curbed to those in power. So it was never because women were not smarter, because they were not capable, but because they were physically weaker in most points. So let the law of the stronger dictate. And we see that this is coming down. This is going down. This is definitely going down. Women are starting to really have a voice. They're starting to talk about it, their problems. And we have to empower who? The weaker. We have to empower those without a voice. So that's very important for us to stick, like in the case of bullies, we have to really stick to those that have no voice. But again, nobody's a victim, not even as a collection of society or genders. Like I said, a lot of the abusers say they'll never abuse again until they're born, and then they commit the cycle again. So we just, yeah.
We thank you, Deborah, for this amazing presentation. Thank you. We